I can clearly see, this term normal is not actually that much normal as well. And then, different parts of the world, actually, this term normality even does not exist as well. There are some parts of the world, they don't say it normal, they say traditional, they say like socially acceptable.
Welcome to a crossover episode with Dr. Almas Taj Awan. Could you do the introduction for us?
Thank you, Paul. I'm the host of Innovation from the Global South on Future Frame TV, the collective podcast of Traces.Dreams. Thank you very much, Paul, for having me on your show.
Well, so the series I curate is Idioms of Normality, and I ask people the question, what is normal? And innovation is such a great topic to discuss, and I'd like to learn more about your series and where you're taking it, but I'm going to jump in with the first question, what is normal?
Well, I think we are going to stick more towards this, just one question about normality, because I think this is the most difficult question. And when you invited me, I was really scared of it. And it took me some time for, sorting it out. So I think, Paul, a normality is something that is being accepted by the vast majority of the people in certain society. It can be, a family tradition. It can be, it can be anything. It can be a kind of culture for any specific organization. So yeah, this is what normal is.
So normality is something that is accepted by the vast majority of a population, but your series looks at innovation. And for me, when I think of innovation, I think of something that challenges normality or pushes the boundaries of normality. What is innovation?
Well, innovation is any kind of change that you bring in the process or the product. And important thing is that it can be monetized. So, there are uses for it. If I link that concept with normality, so yeah, normality also obviously has users because, it is applied on certain group of people. But talking about innovation, what can be innovation in normality is to think about or rethink about those normals or those norms, that are being established within a certain group of people. Because my feeling is that the time when probably those norms they were made, it was accepted at that time by the maximum number of group of people, but not necessarily those times they exist now. If the same norms they are practiced now. So we have so many traditions that are considered normal, but they were established like 100 years ago, like centuries ago, but they are no more. We don't have those set of group of people with with all those requirements. So they are no more actually applicable, and they are very much difficult to be practiced by certain group of people. But still, as they are considered normal, so we don't have any other choice. We just follow those normals.
So I guess one of the challenges of innovation is that it's not necessarily readily accepted by populations in the first instance. One of the challenges I imagine of, say, monetizing innovation is making it user-friendly, making it go viral, making sure that people adopt it and people adapt with it. And so that these innovations become the new normal in some ways.
Yeah, but it's really challenging because one thing is to have innovation, one thing is to bring those different qualities that are required by people, and the second thing is to make it available in the market. These are two completely different things. So we see that. I have from the scientific background, so. From science, there are so many publications that we have. There are so many technologies that each day, there are researchers, they are working on and publishing papers. But one thing is to publish paper, and the other thing is to really, have that product that can be sold in the market. So these are completely, two different things. And then reaching out to the mindset of the people who are actually quite used to with the previous normal, is also challenging. But yeah, there are many factors, that involved. So innovations, they require a lot of work.
Some examples that come to mind are like eradicating single-use plastic. People have become so accustomed to single-use plastic that disrupting that norm is going to be really difficult, right? What are some of the strategies to disrupt the norm and to implement innovations within a society?
I think we need to start from changing the mindset. So we have seen that today we have lots of sustainable projects going on, but this was not that easy. I mean, these days, if we write on something that this is biodegradable, this term biodegradable is being understood now at least by vast majority. But there was a time where people, they were like, I mean, why? I mean, if it's written biodegradable, I mean, they were not giving that much importance. So it is a long-term process, and it takes time. It also takes some understanding of the culture, because something that uh, is applicable in one part of the world, not necessarily it is being applicable, or it can be applied to the other, because we have difference in the cultures. And also there are many other factors as well. So in one part of the world we are talking about, hey, I mean, why we are using these plastic cups for having water, but the reality in some other part of the world is completely different. Hey, they don't have water actually to drink. So there are so many questions actually to ask. And maybe, I mean, this can be, I mean, you can ask also about the difference in cultures as well, because my own background is from I'm originally from Pakistan. So my childhood, my university, I did my master's from Pakistan, and now I am living from last 12 years in Brazil. So my scientific journey was a mix of two different countries, and with completely different set of resources. And then as I'm working with different global initiatives, so I can clearly see this term normal is not actually that much normal as well. And then different parts of the world, actually this term normality even does not exist as well. There are some parts of the world, they don't say it normal, they say traditional, they say like socially acceptable.
That's a really good point, because the word normal is actually quite a very recent invention. It was a word that was brought from astronomy into demography in like the 1830s, and in the 20th century it was when it gained traction in wider society, and politicians started using the words, and then it became a setting on your washing machine, and then it infiltrated everyday life, and people started talking about the normal. And this word was incredibly effective at globalizing and moving into other cultures. And in some sense, I think there is there is some kind of cognitive pathway in our brain that is hijacked by the concept of normality, because talking about something that's socially accepted, or talking about traditions, strictly speaking, those are distinct ideas from normality, and yet they can bleed over each other. And I think once people adopt the word normal, I think it can change the flavor of the way in which we think about our patterns of living. It can change the tenor of what we think of as socially acceptable. And I kind of want to be a little bit. I kind of want to challenge the topic here a bit, because I think in some ways the concept of normality has been a way to market innovations to the wider public, to tell them, oh, it's completely normal to use ethanol on your skin every time you touch a public door handle. Oh, it's completely normal to use toilet paper. Oh, it's completely normal to use throwaway products. Oh, it's completely normal to use petrol in your car. It's completely normal to use products that that leach out into the oceans. And by creating this concept of normality and then capitalizing upon it through the marketing of products that are detrimental to the rest of nature, I think that there's an economy of normality that has been built, that capitalizes upon that mindset. And I sort of think that if you're talking about biodegradable products, sustainable products, maybe we need to get rid of the normality mindset. Do you think we need to get rid of the normality mindset? Is there something perhaps problematic about normality?
Problematic, yes, for sure it is, and especially when it is harming our environment, or it is harming ourselves, or anyone, who anything that is actually normal for anyone else but not normal for you, that definitely is not okay. Going back to the question that you said about should we question normality? Yes, definitely we should, but then there is another question: is everyone capable of questioning normality? I feel it is that wonderful question that just very few of us have the luxury to think about. So as I said about our my different background, I really feel that, I mean, our education systems, our religious systems, our political systems, our corporate systems, they are designed in a way that people, they are not allowed to think, with freedom, with liberation, with that free thinking. So to start with, there are many parts of the world where children, since the beginning, they are raised as adults in a way that they are not allowed to question. So this sense of questioning normality, I feel it is also a luxury. If I'm sitting here and thinking about this question and saying that, hey, this has been shown normal on the TV, but it is actually not. This is because of that sense that I have developed over the years. It was not something that I was raised up with. It was something that my life conditions, my surroundings, they brought me all those opportunities where I could learn how to question. So definitely, I agree with you. We should question normality, but then the next question is that how many of us do have that luxury to go for questioning?
It's an interesting point that you make, because I think the importance is not just in questioning normality, but taking action on how you question normality. And that's challenging whether or not the structures allow for it, because the structures that we have in place in politics, in bureaucracy, in other forms of social structures, they are obstacles to implementing change, right? Implementing meaningful, impactful, fulfilling change. So questioning normality, I think everyone has a little moment where they do it. As school teachers, I remember a school teacher asking me once, and I'm sure everyone's been asked this by either a parent or a school teacher, if your friends jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff? And you're like, well, no. And yet, in what you're saying, even though the rhetoric is, if your friends jump off a cliff, don't jump off a cliff. Don't blindly follow them off the cliff. And yet, the practice of education and the way in which our social systems operate says, hey, follow the status quo. Stop questioning this. Stop resisting it. Stop trying to disrupt it. Just come on, fall into line, conform to the normal, and stop questioning this. Because I think everyone has a little moment where they go, yes, but what is normal? And I think for me, what my real desire is to expand that moment, for people to sit with that question for just a little bit longer, and to take the question seriously, like really seriously, not just, someone says, oh, your shoes are a bit weird. And you're like, yes, but what is normal? And then you move on and forget about the instance at all. Like, the problem, I think, in talking about normality as something that's widely accepted by the vast majority of a population, if you tell the vast majority of a population that you all need to be wearing leather shoes, I think that's problematic, because if everyone's wearing leather shoes, we're going to have to kill a lot of cows to get the leather to make everyone leather shoes. If you tell everyone in the population that they all have to drive the same car, then there's materials that are being extracted from one part of the world, and that monoculture of normality, I think, is where we see the biggest impacts on the rest of nature, because of the resources that we extract in order to feed that yearning, that striving for normality. Is the fact that we conform to something that the vast majority of people do Is that perhaps one of the problems of sustainability?
Yeah, sure. But the good thing is that with the passage of time, things they are changing. So yes, there was a time where using leather shoes by everyone was a normal, and still there are some parts of the world where mamas they prefer buying leather shoes because they think that they are more durable. Uh, but then yes, there are many other parts of the world where this conscious um, idea has been generated that why it is not that good and why it is not good for our planet, why we should take care of the animals as well, and why this is against the sustainability principles. So yeah, things they're changing slowly, but the question of normality is something that is really important to be asked for going towards the better side of the humanity, for actually saving our planet as well in the long run.
It's interesting that you took the word biodegradable as an example. That not everyone was familiar with this word biodegradable, and it's interesting because I don't think everyone needed to be aware of what the word biodegradable was. Certainly, prior to the industrial and agricultural revolution, the idea of something being biodegradable was kind of obsolete because everything everyone was using prior to the industrial and agricultural revolution was pretty much biodegradable. It wasn't until we started pulling crude oil out of the planet that we started creating and extracting all kinds of chemicals and creating new kinds of detergents and industrial chemicals. It wasn't until that started happening that we needed to think about biodegradability. What I find interesting, though, is that people didn't think about biodegradability in the first instance. People started selling paints, they started selling detergents, they started selling crude oil, they started selling all these innovations really fast, and people were making huge profits. And then concepts like biodegradability and sustainability and conservation, those concepts took much, much longer to catch up, and they've still got such a long distance to go. What pathways forward do you see for things like issues like sustainability?
Well, I think first of all, in our education system, I feel we need to train our next generation. This is really important, and then I think I mean apart from that, our politicians, our political systems as well, they need to make such regulations, so that they bound innovators to follow those sustainability patterns, because otherwise everyone would be thinking more about users and also the profits that they're going to make. So sustainability practices, they're really important, but they cannot go ahead without any kind of regulation. So yes, there are many parts of the world we will say that, hey, in my country we have this, but yeah, there are many countries in the world where there are no regulations. So there are many parts of the world where sewage system is actually there is no treatment, and it goes directly into the rivers, and it's affecting our aquatic life. Why should people, they think about treating the sewage if government, I mean, there are no regulations by the government side, and if there is no one thinking about those little fishes who are inside those rivers, because they cannot speak directly to the population. So I feel until and unless, I mean, the steps, they are not going to come, regulations are not going to come by the government side, I don't think so that this is going to be, I mean, the issues, they are going to be solved. I'm saying again and again, in different parts of the world, because yes, I know there is a vast majority that actually, I mean, they have no idea about what we are talking about. I mean, sustainability and all this stuff.
Well, and I don't want to gloss over the point that you make there, which is a really important point, that there's a lot of local variation, and the diversity of problems and behaviors that we see around the world is is part of understanding normality, part of understanding innovation, but also a key part of developing sustainability solutions. I remember when I was living in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta, um, there were these boats with little outboard motors with really, because some of the Mekong Delta isn't very deep. They have these really long outboard motors, and I would constantly see these boats with outboard motors having to pull up their rudder, having to take a plastic bag off the fan at the end of the outboard motor, and then they'd throw the plastic bag right back into the Mekong Delta and then pop the motor back into the water. It's like, hang on, like you just that someone else is going to run into the same problem that you just ran into. But what's the other solution? I mean, fill their boat up with all these plastic that they're pulling out of the Mekong Delta. It's quite tricky. And then what you're talking about in terms of government regulation is so important. And I was quite pleased to see that bureaucrats in the EU have gone a considerable distance to make sure that sustainability is gaining traction in policy and in regulations for the EU. And I really hope that continues for many countries around the world. And here I'm embarrassed to be Australian, because Australians are literally at the very bottom of the ranking system for countries that are taking action on climate change. It's just horribly embarrassing. So when you're talking about local variations in tackling these issues, I mean, gosh, as an Australian, I'm so aware of this because I'm so embarrassed by how poorly the Australian government is tackling these massive global problems. You lived in Pakistan, you grew up in Pakistan, then you moved to Brazil. You've been working and living there for 12 years. Tell me a bit about how your understanding of normality has changed.
Okay. I think, globalization has made this possible. I really, when I made that question that our education system is not built in that way where, we are allowed to question. So, literally, I meant that. So one thing, there is one layer of education, and then there is another layer of, social setup where we are not allowed to question normality. That actually, I said that this word normality doesn't exist in many parts of the world. So most of the times it's called traditional or traditions. So we cannot go out of our traditions. We cannot go out of our strict cultural norms that have been, practiced from centuries. So while being part of that culture, it's very difficult, to question, those norms. So my journey was from Pakistan to Brazil. The two countries, they are completely, I would say that on the opposite side of the hemisphere, I would say, because everything is so different, and that made me question many things from my past culture and many things from my new culture as well. I would say that journey is still continues, because each day I discover something new that I feel that it might is not normal, and then I try to have a new normal.
Give me some examples. What examples come to mind as you think about this?
Actually, it's about everything. It's about, the food habits, it's about culture, it's about religion, it's about social interactions. It's about the way people, they interact. So, just for giving you one example, that in Brazil, even you can give a smile to a stranger. That's completely fine. But back in my own country, in Pakistan, I cannot do that because this is not normal over there. So, that is, sometimes I see that, or I feel that I'm living, two parallel lives, So, but that is a privilege for me, actually, because that makes me understand, that makes me a bit more humble. And, each day I become less judgmental about people, because I give them that space where I feel that, something that they're doing might have, different circumstances, So today I feel that I'm a lot more, I have acceptance. I feel I judge very less.
I think you need a little bit of acceptance and understanding and calm to be able to, and also the experience outside your own, your own upbringing. That experience outside your own upbringing makes you question things that you never thought to question in the first place, because it was just the way you did things. So tell me some of the differences, because it would have been, I imagine that there were things that were strictly forbidden to question in your upbringing that suddenly in Brazil, like it's completely different experience. and vice versa as well. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between those two cultures, very family oriented, very colorful, very vibrant cultures. But there would have been a lot of sort of paradigm shifting events as you transitioned between these two different cultures.
Exactly. I feel here in this culture, it's more like, nuclear family system. I feel that makes things a lot more easier compared to the joint family system that prevails in the subcontinent of India. But I feel also that there are some goods and bads on both sides. So, there are other things that, in big families we enjoy that we cannot enjoy in small nuclear families. But one thing is that, I mean, as we are talking more about question of normality, I think it becomes a lot more easier when you are in a small family, to think about or to challenge, those norms, traditions that are not actually suitable for you. To when you are in a bigger setup where you just don't have your parents, actually you have your relatives, your cousins, because social interactions, they are very they're very closed, they're very intimate actually. So anyone can give suggestions to you about how you look like and how you should look like and how you should dress and how you should go out in the social gatherings and when you should get married, how much studies you should have, where you should do a job or you should not have a job, how many children you should have.
Which is
So
very confronting if you move into that culture. People are like, hang on,
exactly.
you don't have a right to tell me what to do. And yet it's completely habitual.
Yeah, and then that tradition of having an arranged marriage. So in my case, everything was completely opposite, completely opposite. But again, I would not say that, wow, I was so brave that I broke all those norms. No, I was not. Uh, or I was a bit, but I think it was also because of my family, because my parents, they were always there uh, to search for a new normal, to build a new normal. So it was by their support. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult for me to have, those single decisions just on my own behalf.
Yeah, you need a supportive family environment, I think, to be able to question the fabric which you think with and which you live with. And with a supportive family environment, it gives you the confidence to change your norms and to step outside of your box and to
Exactly.
move abroad, to experience new cultures.
Yeah, I mean, in my family, just to give you some idea, I'm the first girl who went to university. My father was the first man who went to university because back in his family, my grandfather, he was a landlord. So he had a lot of land and there was no culture of, education. So my father was the first one and then I was the first one among the females. It was not obviously that easy for me. Why? Because I had no role models around me. So I was always trying to search, on my own, uh, people I could learn from. And the good thing was that, okay, my father was always there, my mother was always there to support me, but it was not that easy. I would say that when we are trying to challenge normal, one of the things that actually is a kind of a hurdle is back in our mind, in our subconscious, because we don't see examples in front of us. So yeah, I mean, if there are people who are suffering because they actually cannot follow a normal, but still they try to follow the culture, or the tradition or whatever normal has been established. I think this is one of the reasons, because they don't see examples around them, and their mind, in their subconscious, they fear that if they're going to do something that is not normal, it can give them some kind of harm.
I feel normality in some ways has drifted into popular society as with a lot of superstitious baggage. If I don't sanitize my hands after touching this door handle, which has become the new norm, or if I don't do certain practices of hygiene, then I will fall in, the evils of abnormality will catch up with me and and I'll get sick or something. I do feel that even though it appears like a scientific concept, even though normality has the appearance of objectivity and it has the appearance of being something you can point your finger at and say, oh, look, it has a measurable quality to it. I think nonetheless, it has allowed some superstitious elements come in with it, and they're still lurking there, but they're hidden from our sight because it appears scientific. And if it's scientific, then of course it couldn't be superstitious at all.
Yeah, superstitions are also kind of, old traditional knowledge actually that still, is practiced in many parts of the world. But yeah, I mean, I feel that science makes things a lot easier and understandable and gives logic to everything. I think education can be but education is the main thing that can solve this issue, because this is really, I mean, superstitions, they are issues.
But it's supportive education, right? The kind of education that is supportive, that is enriching, that allows people to question the status quo. Allow me to finish with the question, what questions do you think we should ask about normality? What questions should we ask to challenge normality?
I think first of all, we should start from ourselves. What is normal for me might not be normal for you. So, I mean, asking these questions from ourselves, it might, create better societies, more peaceful societies, because what I see these days that everyone is, fighting for something because there is something that he considers normal and not someone else. So I think having this, acceptance that, okay, something is normal for me, but it might not be normal for everyone else. This is the first thing. And I think that the second thing is that I really feel that our education systems, they need to change. Our education systems, our religious systems, our political systems, where people, even we say about democracy, but there are many democracies where people, they're not allowed to speak, or allowed to question. So this is something that, should be part of the, systems where people, adults, even children, they should be allowed to think critically and to question, what apparently is normal and might not be normal for them. And even if it's normal and it should be normal for everyone, but still, they should be allowed to question, with logic.
Almas, thank you so much for letting us do a crossover episode for Future Frame TV. It's so much fun.
Thank you very much, Paul. It was really great to talk to you.
And all the best with your series, Innovations in the Global South. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your interviewees forthcoming about their ideas and what inventions they've come up with. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, sure. And I think you're giving me new questions for asking to the upcoming guests, about normality.
Excellent. Challenge them. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.